morning, everybody. And I'd like to thank you for inviting me to be with you today and to share my story with you. The title of my presentation is Social Justice Through Photography, though it could probably also be called Discovering the Right Side of My Brain or A New Direction in Retirement. They'd all be appropriate titles for my story. Let me begin by telling you about two very close friends with whom I've gone on many international photography trips. Wherever I go, the three of us could be standing in the exact same spot, and the photographs that we take will be completely different. They're so totally different that we've often toyed with the idea of writing a book based on this premise. I'm going to leave you in suspense for a minute about what those photographs would look like, and I'll get back to it in a minute. One of my favorite writers about photography is a man named David Duchemin. David talks a lot about what he calls your vision when you're taking photos. He talks about your vision being everything that you think, everything you feel, and everything you bring to your photography, your worldview, all of your experiences, good and bad, your likes, your dislikes, your prejudices, and your passions, all built into one. Each of us has a different vision, and this vision influences what we see when we look through the lens of our cameras. Each one of us sees the world through the filter of our own personal vision. My two photography friends have totally different visions than I have. One of my friends will be taking pictures of the tiny little portions of the walls on the buildings around us, the cracks, the crevices, the blemishes, the patterns. Her books are absolutely beautiful, and she's a true artist. But what she sees, her vision is totally different than mine. My other friend, he'll be taking pictures of the large and small graffiti and the windows and the objects in the windows of wherever we go. And his photos are likewise very striking. My vision takes me immediately to the faces of all the people around me. I see faces that tell stories about their lives, and my goal is I want to capture them and tell their stories through my photographs. For you to get a little more familiar with what my vision is, it might be helpful to know a little bit more about my background and my journey to where I am now. As David said, I was a computer science, biology, and chemistry teacher for 35 years. I had an extremely rewarding career. I felt as positive about teaching the day I left as the day I started 35 years earlier. Another lifelong strand of mine, since I was a teenager, has been civil and human rights and social justice. Among other activities, I was president of the Bedford Teachers Association for 14 years up in Westchester County, where I live. Also, the State Teachers Union, NYSUT, which has a membership of over 600,000 people, has a 30-member social justice, civil and human rights committee. It's the conscience of the union. I was a member of that committee for over 30 years, and I was chair of that committee for about half of that time. Most of my life, I was a technology nerd, and I really didn't believe that I had an artistic bone in my body. And when I retired, what floated up to the top of things that I wanted to explore were photography and guitar playing. I took 2 years of weekly guitar lessons, but my fingers just wouldn't do what my mind wanted them to do. So even though I still play a little bit, I didn't really continue it as an important endeavor. But at the same time, I put a tremendous amount of effort into learning about photography. reading a lot, photography workshops. I joined some camera clubs, a lot of practice. And I found that I got a tremendous amount of satisfaction from taking photography, from taking my photographs, especially of people in their natural environments, doing what they do normally, unposed, photographing people, especially with different cultures, different backgrounds, different religions. And I also tried to make a connection with the people that I photographed. I had the opportunity to travel around the world to lots of places to further my photographic vision. And I was also getting a lot of nice outside encouragement. A few photography magazines did features on my work. I've had one person photography show at a gallery in Toronto. And while I loved all of my photography adventures, I felt that something was really missing. And that something was the connection of my photography with my social justice work. That social justice work was so important in my life as a professional, as a teacher, as a member of the Civil and Human Rights Committee, and I wasn't connecting it to my photography. I did have the opportunity to travel to Nicaragua to photograph fair trade coffee and cocoa plantations and look at the impact that fair trade products have on the lives of people. But I needed more than that. And that's where and when I discovered an organization called Photographers Without Borders, modeled after Doctors Without Borders. So what I'm going to do right now is first I'm going to just show you a slideshow of some of my general photography so you get an idea of what my photography is like. And then I'm going to talk about Photographers Without Borders and share two of the assignments that I had with them. One in, well, I'll let you see them later. They're both in India, and I'll give you more detail about both of those assignments in a little bit. After my presentations, I'd be very happy to answer any questions you have and talk about any of my photography. So let me switch to sharing my first video of my general photography. So that was, I hope you enjoyed that. Those were just some of my, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
Ken, it's fine.
Okay, great. Um, One of the most amazing things about doing photography is that so many of the pictures have stories behind them. And it's those stories behind individual pictures that make my journeys just so much more powerful and meaningful for me. This last picture here is just one example. This is a picture of a young 10-year-old girl named Indira. And this was taken in Varanasi, India, the holiest city in India. And I was down walking by the Ganges River when all of a sudden, with no warning, the skies opened up and it started pouring. And I was just there with my guide and translator and myself. And we were not prepared for rain. So we started running up the steps, they're called the Ghats, by the river. And some man comes out of a tent that was on the side of the area we were running up and invited us to get out of the rain and come into the tent. So we took him up on his offer and we went into the tent where the mother, father, and this one 10-year-old girl were living. Very poor family, and they were living in this tent. They had almost nothing. And Indira, this 10-year-old girl, was really fascinated with my camera, which I had around my neck. And we were sitting very near each other, and I sort of handed over, showed her to look through the lens of my camera and showed her how to snap a picture. She was really fascinated, especially looking at the results in the back of the camera. And I showed her how to use the zoom lens, and she really loved it. I mean, she was just taking it all in, so fascinated. Finally, I decided to take the camera off of my neck and put it around her neck and let her start taking pictures. My guide, my translator, thought I was crazy because I have a very expensive beast of a camera. And but it was so important to her, and she started snapping away. And then after a couple of minutes, she said, "Wait a minute," and she went outside the tent to the back of her tent, and she brought in this half of a mannequin, and she told us that this was her only toy. I mean, you can imagine what the impact of being there and hearing this young, beautiful young girl say that this is her only toy. And I snapped a picture while she was talking to me. And then the rain stopped and it was time for us to go. And I told my translator to tell her before we left that maybe someday you'll become a photographer. And I said that with tears in my eyes, knowing what her life is like. But a picture like this brings back such an important memory and such a meaningful experience for me. And that's one of the things that photography does for me. So after I discovered Photographers Without Borders, when I was looking for something else to be able to do, to connect social justice with my photography, I applied to go on assignment with Photographers Without Borders. Now, Photographers Without Borders, they're an organization based in Canada. They have projects in over 50 different countries. And what their process is, what they want to accomplish is to bring volunteer photographers like myself to small nonprofit organizations all around the world, and to have these photographers tell the stories of these organizations that do so much and don't have the resources to hire their own photographer, don't have the money to do that. And the photographers go to these small nonprofit organizations and take all the photographs. Each assignment is for about 2 weeks, and then donate all of the photographs that we take to the organization so that they can use them for any purpose they want. So I went through a process of interviews. I had to do a portfolio review, and they also require some in-person training in ethical photography and ethical storytelling through photography. And also they need to know that you can get along for a couple of weeks in a culture that's very different without the amenities that we're used to living around here. So the first organization that I worked with, well, before I talk about that, just let me say that all of the projects from Photographers Without Borders meet the United Nations standards for sustainable development, which you'll see in a minute. And the first assignment that I was on was in Jodhpur, India, which is in the northwest part of India. And also the organization is called the Sambali Trust. And the Sambali Trust is an organization that was founded, very small, founded by one man who saw what the untouchables, the lowest caste of people in India, what their lives were like. Actually, the untouchables are they're not even considered a caste, they're so low. And many of the people in the untouchables, young girls and women whose lives are totally a disaster. These are people who have never had the opportunity to go to school. They're illiterate. They're often victims of domestic abuse. A lot of human trafficking is involved with the young girls. Many of the young girls turn to prostitution in order to bring in enough money to survive. And what the Sambali Trust does is remarkable things for hundreds of women. They house them, take them off the streets, they feed them, they train them in some sort of work that they can continue after the program. Most of the work that they get trained in doing is in sewing. If they stay in the program for 2 years or more, they're actually given their own sewing machine, which is worth more than a house to them. It allows them to survive and be self-sufficient. They're educated. they're taught English and Hindi. Both Hindi they're not even usually educated in, but they're taught how to read and write in both Hindi and English. They're also taught math. They're taught basic hygiene, which many of them are not even familiar with. Toilet habits, things like brushing your teeth, which they don't even know about. The training goes as far as even teaching them martial arts to help them prevent abusive husbands from beating them, which happens often. And the younger children are trained in things like good touch, bad touch programs because they're often sexually abused. It was an intense emotional experience being with the Sambali Trust and experiencing the amazing work that they do and the literal transformations in their lives and the life-saving that they've done. So I'm going to share a video of photographs and a couple of short videos that I've taken with my work at the Sambali Trust. And let me just get to the sharing here, if I can find it. Why is my... Okay, David. Oh, there we go. Okay, I got it. I found my window. I'm going to skip by the save time reasons, the developmental goals. But Photographers Without Borders, oops, let's get back to this again, sorry. So Photographers Without Borders has a code of ethics that we get trained in. Our goal is to amplify the voices of the people wherever we photograph. Also to be very aware of the privilege that we have. And our privilege is so amazing when you go and see these places. Treat everybody with respect and dignity. Try to create good relationships with the people. Representing the people accurately is extremely important. Not to accentuate the good, not to accentuate the bad, but to create and promote a realistic view of the people. Obtaining explicit consent. Every single picture that I took had to be consented to by the people who I photographed. I actually had to have forms filled out by everybody that was photographed during my time there. Of course, no compensation, complying with local traditions, and people who are vulnerable especially take particular care with. So my job was to take photographs that tell the story, the wonderful story that this organization did. So that was the Sambali Trust, and they absolutely do miracles for these people. By the way, that last little video where they did this little prayer, the prayer is saying, thank you for all that we've received, how lucky we are to be in this program, and now we have an obligation to help other people. So that's a sort of a basic translation of that. My second experience and assignment with Photographers Without Borders was in Kolkata, India, very near Bangladesh. They don't actually speak Hindi, they speak Bengali. And the assignment was with a very, very small nonprofit organization called The Turning Point. The Turning Point was founded by just a wonderful woman, Ishita Sanyal, who her brother had serious mental illness. And she was very frustrated that there wasn't any kind of program that her brother could enter to try to help him. All the doctors and everybody said, his life is going to be hopeless. He'll never be able to accomplish anything. He'll never be happy. There's no hope. And she had a social work background and a psychology background. And she said, I'm not going to accept that. There's got to be some way that he can have, if not what we would call a normal life, but at least he could be happy and find things that could make him happy. So she started this tiny little organization, nonprofit, called The Turning Point, which basically tries to find in people with mental illness things that they feel satisfied with, that they're happy with, some camaraderie, not to be picked on, which they're often picked on, not to be harassed, where they can feel like they have some sort of normal life. And now it's about 15 years later, and the organization is still pretty small, but it's doing much better. And I photographed the organization there. It was a very difficult assignment, both photographically and emotionally. I had never worked in an environment like that before. First of all, physically, the Turning Point is located basically in a room that's 12 feet wide and 25 feet long. That's where I spent most of my 2 weeks. It's very difficult to do photography in that kind of environment, but it was much easier when we were outdoors. And we had opportunities for outdoor photography also. Emotionally, I had never spent such intense time with that type of group of people. And it was a learning experience for me. The founder, Ishita, she was sort of worried about how I would react to being in such a small nonprofit organization. There's some sort of mystique about a photographer from New York. You go to a tiny little village in India and tell them that a photographer from New York is coming to visit them, and they have all of these ideas about what that person is like. And so they were very worried about that. But they made me feel so much at home, and I became part of their family very, very quickly. And I still keep in touch with them at least 2 or 3 times a week. Just wonderful group of people. So let me just show you short video of that experience. And again, these pictures were donated to the Turning Point and to the Sambali Trust. I probably submitted about 750 pictures to each of the organizations, and they were able to use them any way they want with their publicity or fundraising. They could do anything they want with it. I still have legally, I still have the rights to those photos, but I've given them permission to do anything they'd like with them. So here's the Turning Point. So Photographers Without Borders gave me a couple of small digital cameras to bring to the organization, and we spent a lot of time teaching them how to use a digital camera. Most of them have never touched one. And it was great as an exercise for them to look outward. So many of them with their mental health problems really dwell on themselves. And this gave them an opportunity to use the camera as a therapeutic, to take pictures outside their own the world that they were experiencing. And I had a great time with that. Also, a lot of parent involvement, as you saw in the organization. I want to end just again talking about one really special experience, and that was with this young girl in this center. Her name is Nusrat, 18-year-old girl that I absolutely fell in love with. She comes from an extremely devout Muslim family. And Nusrat was born with some serious physical disabilities, challenges, and also some mental challenges. She did go to school, but again, all the doctors said there'd be no way to help her. Her life is going to be miserable. The entire right side of her body did not work right. She had difficulty walking, and her right hand could basically do very little. And there were some other physical deformities. And Nusrat heard about the Turning Point, this organization, and there was something inside Nusrat that kept on telling her that she could do more than what other people thought she could do. And one day after school, she snuck out and she went and visited that small little headquarters of the Turning Point, which was near her school. And she just loved what she saw. And she came back and told her parents about it and asked her parents whether she could join the program at the Turning Point. And her parents said no. Her parents wouldn't let her. And basically, when she lived at home, she was cloistered. When she got out of school, she was forced to stay inside, didn't go out and play. And but she really wanted to join the Turning Point. Her father, who you see there, also one day snuck out without telling his wife and visited the Turning Point. And he loved what he saw. And he came back, talked to his wife, and they agreed to let her join the Turning Point. Well, the Turning Point did amazing things for Nusrat. Let me just forward this, take a look at what we have here. Nusrat has the most outgoing, beautiful inner personality and outer personality. When you talked about how much she's achieved, she would just burst into smiles and laughter. Through some basic physical therapy, she was able to learn how to use her right hand, and she's doing the most amazing needlework now that you could not believe. She also loves my camera. But she's doing tremendous amount of fine needlework that she's so proud of. I interviewed her parents, and one of the most touching things that her mother said was, before we found the Turning Point, I was always worried, what's going to happen to her after we die? What kind of life is she going to be able to have? Is she going to be able to survive when we're gone? And the mother said, now that she's been with the Turning Point, I know that she's going to have a satisfactory, fulfilling life. Well, very sadly, this past year, her mom died of COVID. But the impact that the Turning Point had on their lives, on her life, is just you can't put into words. And it was just an amazing experience being with her. So that is, let me turn that is my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I'd be very happy to answer any questions that any of you have.